West Coast through the middle. Well done by Evans. The power are going to hang on. Ware sends it in. The mark to Georgiadis. And Port Adelaide win.
A brave effort from Port just to withstand that. It's one of Josh Carr's best coach games.
Hello and good evening and welcome to the CREEDCAST. We're here recording Tuesday the 9th of June and I am sitting here with a nice frosty glass of winner's piss because your Port Adelaide Footy Club, after a month of heartbreaking close losses and disappointing losses and everything in between, decided to finally get one over the line with a close win in a hard-fought win out west against similar placed team in the West Coast Eagles. 11-11-77. Geez, it's just a very, very aesthetically pleasing kind of numerology line to look at. Not so much aesthetically pleasing game to look at, and we'll get into that. 10-11-71 to the West Coast Eagles. So a 6-point win out west in front of almost 50,000 West Coast fans out there. So it was a big crowd. Saturday night footy. It was a bit of a cauldron. I recollect watching the replay that Tom Hawkins was talking about. A very, very good atmosphere that he was experiencing watching the game. So, Jamie, good evening, mate. We watched it together, and I appreciate you making the trek up to enjoy some barbecued meats and watch our boys play an entertaining one. It was a good, nice little break to my long weekend of working in hospitality, but yeah, it was a stressful one, but thankfully a stressful one that we got to enjoy being on the right side of for a change.
Breathe it in, Creed fam. Breathe it in. We are on our comeback to a wild card place, and it began on Saturday night. No, hello to you, Dave, and everyone else joining us. Yeah, it was a nice night with us two spent together in unison, a Creed watch, if you will. And yes, those lamb cutlets were fucking sensational. Yeah, sorry to remind you. I need to just pop down the butcher again as soon as they open. But yeah, what a slog. But I'll take it. I'll take it, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think we obviously recorded the mid-year review with Eddie Corns, and thank you to him again for jumping on. It's always an entertaining time with him, and he's very accommodating with his time and his insights, and it was a lot of good chat about kind of the future of where we're going, and we talked briefly about the second half of the season and how many wins we might possibly see in that time, and I think Eddie's number was 2. It is a tough run of games that we've got coming up, and I think this was one of the ones he actually said was, a possible win, but I can't remember which ones he actually said were possibly wins. But this was one of the ones, if you want to get a couple of wins out of the back half of the year as a rebuilding side. So, yeah, we get the win, get some, it was a cauldron a little bit. Like the pressure was, particularly that last quarter, the pressure numbers were north of 200 for both teams. So, obviously, the interchange issue for us late meant that a lot of players had to just stay out there and slog through it as well. So on the experiential side, we've been looking at a few close losses recently in which we kind of talked about how to manage those final minutes. And there's always a little bit of luck involved as well, but you make your own luck based on how well structured you are, how applicable to your processes you are. And I thought, just as a bit of experience for this young side and some of those young players out there that are out in the field in those last few minutes, and even the ones that were on the bench, we were watching Christian Moraes coach up on his feet, coaching from the bench late in the game. If you recollect the replay, watch the replay today, and kind of remember we talked about it on the night.
With Burgoyne shot.
Yeah, yeah. But it's a good experience for everyone, and I think it's good to see us manage out a game with every bit of pressure against us as well. It was, backs against the wall, out on your feet, cramps, hitting, and we managed to kind of just keep particularly in the last minute and a half, keep the ball kind of in our front half and not allow them that last chance surge to kind of try to get, what would have been a win or actually they would have been going for the win because the 6-point margin only comes from a Mitch Georgiades shot after the siren.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we had to push it right uphill for that entire fourth quarter. The second half, broadly, was one played largely on West Coast terms, but yeah, maybe a bit of growth there very late in that fourth quarter. Although we were defending from our offensive goal square. And West Coast had to go coast to coast due to that Burgoyne shot and then behind. Whereas in the showdown, for example, we had to defend from the center stoppage. So a little bit different, but still they would have been nervous and would have had to take whatever learnings they've garnered from these close games and apply it there. And as many people have said, it does come down to a bit of luck sometimes, but one that, I think we deserve to win. I think either side would have deserved to win at the end of it all. There's some discussion to be had about taking chances. I know that a lot of the discussion has been about West Coast missed chances in the last quarter, but not a lot of discussion about Port Adelaide's missed chances predominantly in the first quarter. So swings and roundabouts and our beloved butterfly effect of football, things could have been a lot different come halftime, but they weren't, exactly like the game at Adelaide Oval earlier this year. But on this occasion, we did just enough. And credit to our defensive line. They had to absorb a lot of pressure. There was a lot of dump kicking going on, and West Coast was setting up fairly well. There were a few occasions where our forwards were pushing up a bit too high, as noted in commentary. But by and large, we got it sorted out, and it was probably our disposal overall that let us down. And again, same could be said for West Coast, and therefore whoever won at the end of the day probably deserved to. And I'm just damn well glad that it was us for once.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, before a couple more stats things we'll talk about before we get to talking about the lines. And you kind of just brought up, deserved winners and missed opportunities and things like that. And so, of course, we have to talk about AFL X Score for a moment. And this is another game that we were the winners on X Score, and thankfully we were also the winners in Real Score, which has not happened as much as we would have liked this year. Port's expected score on X Score was 86.7. They scored 77. West Coast's expected score was 77.5. They scored 69. That's expected score, so that's not counting in. For those that, when you listen to this and you hear me say 69 for West Coast and go, well, they scored 71, expected score doesn't count rushed behind. So they're, because obviously that's outside of scoring opportunities. So, the expected score was still a Port win, and actually by a slightly bigger margin. Of course, West Coast, both teams scored under their expected score, but at the end of the day, we're basically looking at an almost, a 9-point win on an X Score. We win by 6. So it kind of shows that it was actually a game played quite tightly. Both teams had their turnover moments. Of course, disposals. West Coast had 357. We had 326. They had the 56 inside 50s to our 48. A lot of that kind of is franked by the last 10 to 15 minutes of the game. But probably a couple of the key ones for looking at the kind of the overall game as we start looking at the lines in a few minutes here. 71.1% disposal efficiency for West Coast versus our 67.8. So we're down. They're a couple percentage points down on their average, but we're 3 or 4 percentage points down on our average. So we kind of, we always talk about mitigating gaps or staying consistent to what you're doing to get the best out of your footy. That's a little bit of a drop off for us, and we still get the win. Probably one of the major ones for how the game was played. The centre clearance was 14-7 West Coast favour, but stoppage was 20-32 in our favour. So, they're getting a lot of their success and their ability to get some score and some forward half time was generated by just absolute dominance at the centre clearance. And once we could get numbers around the ball, that's when we started having a little bit more fun. But the centre clearance being such a crucial part of where the ball gets, the areas of the ground the ball gets to, it's what West Coast were able to do in that area was what kind of kept the game close, because we threatened a few times to take this game away. You talked about sliding door or butterfly effect. I've got sliding doors written in my notes. It's kind of the same idea, different vernacular. And the other one, of course, 71 turnovers, West Coast 79 for us. We average 67. The averages for the teams are 65 and 65.1 and 67.8. 67.8 being our average, and both teams turn over the ball more, but we turn it over much more on our season average. And we don't actually get hurt.
Oh, and it felt like that.
It did, yeah. We don't actually get hurt by it nearly as much, because I think turnover score, as I scroll down here, they score 6 goals 6 from turnover, but we also score 8 goals 6 from their turnovers. So considering we had more turnovers, we score more. So both the teams that were we benefited more from less turnovers. So there's that. A lot of these margins in the score source and score origin are pretty tight, apart from where the score origin was, which we'll get to. But back to the sliding doors thing before we get to the lines, Jamie. I had a couple of moments written down. We had Jason Horne-Francis, of course, get a really nice free kick from gathering Willem Dersma in front of goal, and he just misses a snap around the body kick. It's not a high percentage chance, but it's a reasonable one in the modern AFL. And players like Jason Horne-Francis, not to besmirch his game, he did have a good goal scoring game and a great game overall. So, but he does miss there, and obviously then it goes down forward, and 30 seconds later, Dersma's scoring the goal down there. So it felt like a bit of a 12-point play there. Brings the game back. Every time these things happen, it was when Port were about 18 to 20 points up, and you think, well, if they get to 26, 30 or something like that, maybe that and later in the game, that breaks it open. Then there was a late in the third quarter, Jordan Sweet snaps at one out of stoppage, and it gets just the fingertip, and obviously the call on the ground was a behind, and it was umpire's call after the review because there was insufficient evidence. So if the umpires had called it a goal, it would have been a goal, and And then obviously then they go down forward, and Tom Cole scores one in general play with like 7 seconds to go in the third quarter. So it was twice that we just had moments where we felt like we were going to get a break on, but instead they scored soon after. So they were these real 12-point swings. And then that just gave them that hope in the last quarter that, we only have to kick 2 or 3 to get back into this. And they did. Obviously, they didn't kick more and actually get ahead, but it was just close enough. And, that Tom Cole goal right on the third quarter siren felt like the moment that was, I think, I can't remember what we were like on the night, but we just I think we both looked at each other and just like, it's going to be a tight.
We were a bit despondent in the moment because you felt like we felt like we had a grip on the game. And we had that buffer that wasn't magnificent, but in the context of the game was adequate. And then, a goal before 3-quarter time. I know occasions in the past where we've benefited from that 3-quarter time siren goal, if you will, and it's flowed over to the fourth quarter. I remember there was a Charlie Dixon goal in COVID in 2020 year up. I can't remember who. I think we might have actually been playing West Coast or GWS. That's just dipping deep into the memory. But you can't say that these things don't matter. Morale, motivation, all of those connotations definitely get amplified with a moment like that before 3-quarter time, and just fuels you along for the last quarter and into a last quarter where they applied phenomenal pressure, matched by a pressure rating on our side of over 200 or around 200 as well. So it was a hotly contested game in that last stanza.
Yeah. I guess one more note to touch on before we get to the lines. It obviously been talked about a bit, and it was talked about during the game. Zach Butters with just under 6 minutes to go. Sorry, under 5 minutes to go in the game. I think off the ground, getting his calves worked on quite liberally because he was cramping up, as a lot were, and he was on the bench, and it flashed up with the interchange numbers left, and it was 4 for West Coast, 1 for Port Adelaide, and I think it was about 4 minutes and 53 seconds to go. And we both looked at each other. Well, he's going to want to get back on. So that's the last interchange right there. And Zach Butters confirmed after the game that he talked to the high performance manager and said, "Get me back on." Like, it was just like, I'm going back on. There's no other option for you. And he was back on soon after that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and look, to be fair, as long as he was, obviously not having one of those cramps, it's going to be 5 minutes long, then, you're getting him back on because you need your best players on in the last few minutes of a close game. So it makes sense, but more in the macro of it all is, we've seen a few occasions this year. I think Lockie Jones was that against Hawthorn? I can't remember. Lockie Jones cramping up late and wasn't able to get off because we had run out of rotations. And teams are going to push the rotations because that's why the limits have been brought in, was to make teams accountable to that. But we've seen a couple of occasions this year. I don't think it's a major concern, but I think it's just something to note that just as we develop as a young side, that we're, how we're playing is maybe making them push the limit of the rotations, and we're finding ourselves in situations like this a couple of times this year. And just one of those things to kind of note that going forward is you probably want to manage it just a touch better. Because I don't think there's any real mitigating circumstances that have us with less than West Coast at the back end of the game. We both lost players at a similar time of the game. They lose Ruben Jimby to a chasing Mitch Georgiades injury, which was we'll talk about, of course, when we talk about the forward line a bit. But we lose Josh Lai at I think a reasonably similar time of the game to a concussion. Unfortunately, getting a little bit of friendly fire from Asava Radagalia's yeah, I think it was his butt, to be honest. It's just like it was somewhere in the back. Yeah, so unfortunate, just what happens in footy sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. It's nothing much more to write home about, but I just thought it was worth noting that this is something that Port Adelaide have contended with a couple of times this year, is the maybe just finding themselves a bit short at the back end of a close game on rotations.
Yeah, you're just flirting with danger. And I think, Mark Buckley on SCNSA has brought it up a few times. Like, because if someone is injured, then what, you have to play with 17 on the ground, essentially. So, they brought it up in the post-match presser. Yeah. Josh Carr put it down to a bit of extra cramping based on the break. So, whether that's just a convenient excuse or if, just 1 week less of match continuity has that effect on people, I'm not sure. But it's not ideal. And we're just thankful that no one did cop an injury late in that last 4 minutes, because it would have seriously hurt. Would have been interesting. But the game's tough enough as it is with 18 on the field, let alone having to sacrifice someone just because you're out of rotations. But like you said off the top, like, teams are going to go close because the AFL has designed it in a way where you are capped. So, but we do, like you said, we do generally come pretty close, which is interesting. And I don't know the reasons why. It's probably really nuffy areas as to why. But thankful that we get through the game, we get the win. A little story comes out of it that we can chat about. Particularly coming up against Sydney this weekend, I hope we've got plenty of rotations left late while we challenge for a win at home.
Yeah, challenge for a win at home against Sydney. It'll be an intriguing one. Of course, we'll talk about that later in the week in the squad show. But one of the reasons it just came off the head as we were kind of ruminating on it, I was just, it could just be a factor of a young side with a lot of young players out there that you're wanting to get off for a break and a chat to, and you might just be utilizing a few more rotations than you would usually with a side that's a touch more experienced. That could be completely wrong. That's just one thought I just had, because I was just thinking, young sides, Josh Carr's talked about wanting to talk to, as part of the coaching on the bench, you want to have immediate feedback and things like that. And they could just be getting a few more off here and there wanting to get a little bit of feedback in, and also young players are obviously they're still building stamina into. We have a lot of youth in the side. Obviously, West Coast too do, and West Coast, to be fair, got within 2 rotations of their cap as well. So it's not like both teams. It's just we got closer, quicker, and obviously, and it's fine margins in that. But yeah, it was certainly. In the moment, like we're talking about now, and like, oh, well, we won, it's all good. But in the moment when we were sitting there on Saturday night, it was just like, oh fuck, like this is not
yeah, how did this happen?
good. Like, yeah, because I mean, players were cramping up late there, and they had no choice but to stay on. I mean, Mitch Georgiades misses that goal late, and he's just missed goals all year anyway. So but he was cramping up as he did, so you can give him an excuse there. And but
it looked like he had 2 peg legs after he kicked that goal after the siren. So the one let off for the year. Every other miss, it's just like, come on, George.
Yeah, including a couple of this one, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I mean, let's go to the lines now, and I think it's worth starting with the biggest positive as far as just what we want to give flowers to, I guess, and with the fact that the last 10 to 15 minutes of the game basically spent itself at one end of the ground, as I fumble over my words there, but we'll press on. The defense, obviously a couple of players that will feature possibly later, and just have featured in coaches' votes and had a fair bit of love over the last few days out of that game. The defense stood tall late, which was very, very much a team effort as we kind of had to flood back and protect the lead a bit as we were cramping up and out of rotations, and West Coast kind of surged. But the defense had some. Obviously, it's never a perfect game, because if another team's kicking goals, and a few of them from a little bit of broken plays, and we'll talk about it. But overall, I think we forget, because of West Coast is such a shit show for the last half a decade, that going west used to be one of the toughest trips, whether you're playing West Coast or Freo, was often one of the tougher trips. And going, when we're a similar age side in a similar place on the ladder, going west against a West Coast side that is looking to try to get some wins into these young players and get the experience in, and they certainly want to win in front of almost 50,000 fans turning up on a Saturday night. Everything was against them in those last few minutes, and they stood tall as a group, and it was particularly marshalled by leaders like Aaliyah, and ably supported by an incredible performance from Asava Radaglia.
Yeah, I mean, the inside 50s that they had to cope with, and yes, it was franked in the last quarter for West Coast, but when you marry up the turnover numbers as well on our behalf, it really was a sight to behold. Well, a game to be thankful of, that we do have the 2 key pillars, but they are ably supported by the likes of Lockie Jones and DBJ, with a bit of experience, thankfully enough. Like it's one part of the ground where, and it was interesting why they put DBJ down there, like going back earlier in the season. They've really shored up that defensive third, provided we're all at full health. It is just a band of merry men that kind of are workhorses. Obviously, Aaliyah is in all-Australian form. His stats don't really jump off the page as some other performances, and perhaps that's now due to the tag team that he's able to run with Asava. Like you said, just a fantastic performance, and it seemed fairly obvious early on that he was locked in with Kane Corns for 5 till 6 Eastern Standard Time. But I think those 2 stand out. But as I'm sure you watched today, and I saw on replay, like there were fleeting moments by everyone else that contributed.
Mm-hmm.
Even Logan Evans had his moments down back. It's just, again, like it's a key factor of our game this year, and we discussed that with Eddie. about building that foundation of defence, and we've got a nucleus of players that are able to hold up under pressure. Sure, we're on the negative side of win-loss, but I think we've discussed many, many times that it's not necessarily their fault, and they've actually held up very well all season under duress, whether it be due to poor midfield defence or team defence from the front third and coming back. But really impressive. Obviously really impressive game from Asava, and we've been pretty chuffed with his performances over the last 12 months now, or 18 months. But it is really funny when he's in and around the comeback trail, and just the negative connotations that go along with his presence, when in reality, like a game like that, and a game like that shows what they're capable of in tandem. Look, apart from Jake Waterman, who did have a great game, excuse me, and it's just a poor run of the yips, a poorer run of the yips than Mitch Georgiadis, if you can believe. It's a Job Shanahan and Cooper Duff Titler. So, the West Coast don't exactly have like a two-headed monster that we have to go toe-to-toe with. But you can only play against the opposition that you put against. And I'm of the belief that if you're a more experienced player than your direct opposition, or if you're more talented, it's up to you to assert that dominance. And from that point of view, I thought Asava did exactly that.
Yeah, he did. And it's interesting because we've seen him be beset by injury a little bit this year, but he's come back in and found some run pretty quickly, which is promising. And I think it's kind of, as we look, it's a macro point, but just a quick point, like look forward for the next few years, you feel pretty comfortable about Asava being a part of the side for the next few years, which is probably not something we might have said 18 months ago, before he had that run last year where he really, really kind of had some of his best form of his career as a defender. We're talking, 2 years ago or whenever it was that he was getting thrown down forward. He's found form. He's found a partnership down
through
there.
A bit of necessity.
Yes, it was, but also if he was in good form and trusted down back, he wouldn't have been. And it's just like he wasn't really given the opportunity at that point either. Like it was just a bit of what the side was doing at the time. But he's found that trust and just getting a run of form down there as he's been able to start finding some of his best footy. And he even comes out of there with the bandaged head, and you're just like, oh fuck, what a tough motherfucker! Like just
yeah.
I really enjoyed the aesthetics of that at the back end of the game, and just he had to work his ass off, and of course Leah, as per usual, was 100% time on ground and did his work, and obviously had a tough. Waterman's going to stretch the defense, and he was dragging players all over the place, and with those moments that we you can criticize and say what happened there, like that kick. I can't remember who was kicking for goal, but it kind of dropped short, and Job Shanahan marked it just in front of the behind line, and Asava kind of. That was actually
Asava, yeah. On the topic,
watching on the replay, Lockie Jones had free space in front position, and you could see Asava was kind of like looked at Lockie Jones as the player that should be coming, and Lockie Jones kind of stopped thinking it was going through for a behind as well. If I get the time, I might put a little video together of it. I watched it and was just really intrigued by it, because I was like, you could tell they both looked at each other and was just like, what was the plan? Was Lockie Jones should keep coming. And my point being is just like, you've just got to play the ball to the whistle. Like Lockie Jones shouldn't have stopped. Maybe Asava should have stayed bodying up a little bit more. Both of them kind of just stopped in the moment and allowed him to take a free mark, because I think Lockie Jones genuinely stopped thinking, no, that's a behind. But you got to watch it over the line. We saw later on in the game, I can't remember who was kicking for goal, but Jordan Sweet kind of just reached his arm up and almost lackadaisically made sure it went through for behind. It's just like, that's what you've got to do. Whatever way you do it is just, you've got to stay
absolutely
100% on it, right to the moment that the ball is dead. Shout out Johnny Bairstow, like it's all of these moments. It's just
yes. Keep walking, Johnny. Keep walking.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree. Like those are the things in football that I hate. Like whoever it is, particularly if it's our boys, just it's not over till it's over. Just kill the ball, even if you do think it's going through for a behind. Just make absolutely sure you don't have. We have Jack Whitlock, a young up-and-coming, promising tool forward, and Job Shanahan is definitely that for West Coast. And if he's lurking in the vicinity, you don't take any chances. On in your living room, I thought it was going through for a behind, but I'm not there to knock it through regardless. So, whether you think it is or not, just kill it. Just kill it. Please.
Because we've seen it happens all the time in this sport, actually, as a mark taken on the line by a tall forward. Like, it's actually not unusual for it to happen. So it's like, kill the opportunity for that to ever happen. And you're not talking about it. And Shanahan does finish that one, I'm 99% sure, from memory. I think it was one that I thought when, like, the video angle, I think we talked about parallax.
Yeah, because he kicks it really high.
Yeah. And it just looks like it floats across, but the noise of affirmation from the crowd, and then the goal umpire, who was close to the post, but he called it a goal, and I'm obviously not arguing it. But yeah, it was a moment that should have been. It's an unforced error kind of thing. It's just like he shouldn't have had. If he'd taken a great contested mark and both of them had bodied up, then you go, well, fair play. But he essentially takes an uncontested one because two players kind of have a little bit of a miscommunication and don't follow the ball through. So that's a moment of, defensive critical analysis. But overall, the effort can't be denied about what they did on the night to hold West Coast. Obviously, talking about expected score before, we're held below ours, partly, based on our own finishing. And West Coast finishing, particularly Jake Waterman, was rough late. But I did shout out, I think, ball don't lie at one point on the night, because fucking Waterman with the two hands in the back on Aaliyah. I think that was one of his shots in the fourth quarter, possibly, but there was a real clear two hands in the back, and the commentators kind of called it, and I think Adam Simpson was getting a little bit too parochial about his it wasn't called to play on. I was just like, no, that's not what we're here to do. You're a commentator. You can actually just call it bullshit. And,
well, Adam Papalia said that Waterman held his ground firmly or something to that effect. And then, Simo to Tom Hawkins was just like, was that legal? Yeah, and then they showed the replay, and it was a clear push in the back. But no, I think after the discussion of that, then Adam Simpson goes, oh, well, it's paid. But I think it happened a couple of times throughout the night. And, it's just the benefit of the noise of affirmation, like you mentioned. It's definitely a thing. The statistics would prove that, but boy, did it seem turned up a notch, particularly in that last quarter, and everything seemed to be falling West Coast way.
Yeah, it did feel like that. It felt like an overwhelming kind of tsunami situation of just that this is it, until the result was done, it felt like some way we're going to lose this because it's all going against us. But that's part of why you have to credit them, the defensive group, and everyone in totality as well, but just particularly the defensive line for holding up, which obviously was a lot of players back there by the end of it, to make sure of it. Even your forwards that went back, there's a few moments where even guys like Corey Durden was popping up at the half-back flank and getting a hard ball get.
Yeah, Joe Richards.
Putting it on the boot. Yeah. Joe Richards had a nice game as well. And maybe we can, any other points on the defense, feel free to go for it. But as we kind of transition maybe to the midfield group, which will be an interesting discussion, I think. Some things to love in some of the boys, particularly, Joe Richards is a good start. I think he had a nice little game. He had a few moments. I think he got caught holding the ball at one point. But it is an interesting, we look back to, again, last week with the mid-year review with Eddie and talking about the midfield group and his thoughts on the players and that aren't showing him what he wants to see. And We can see some of the things that some of them do, but it's more about the mix. And I thought a few weeks back, maybe when we were in our pomp and dominating Hawthorn for periods of the matches and stuff, like we were starting to figure it out. But again, it is a young group and we're trying different things, and obviously we're missing a few guys. The structure is a little bit, but we got smashed in the centre clearance game, and again, it's just West Coast. I don't know what Harley Reid. It was one of those games where it's like Zach Butters doesn't have many deficiencies in his game at all, and I don't think this is a deficiency in his game. You could tell a few moments he matched it. Like I noted it at the return game at Adelaide Oval earlier in the year when Butters is trying to body up on Reid. Unless he gets the right break or a bit of screen, he's just not going to beat Reid. Like Reid's just when he goes 1-to-1, toe-to-toe, whatever vernacular you want to use, it felt like that matchup wasn't right, and I like it better when it's like a more similar sized body on Reid to whether it's your JHF, who, interestingly enough, by the way, CBA numbers was obviously Jordan Sweet at most, but then horne-francis and Zach Butters were both at 72%. So it's a completely different mix to 6-8 weeks ago, where it was often Butters and Drew were getting the dominant numbers, and it took until maybe against the Geelong game for horne-francis to get north of 50. And we're all very cognizant of why the Port Adelaide have been very clear in the messaging earlier in the year about horne-francis doing a preseason within the season, essentially because of his injury troubles in preseason. But I kind of liked the matchups better when horne-francis was getting the body, and Butters had a tough game at times, and his disposal was off a bit. And I think that comes down to the high pressure, high intensity at times, and just kind of the lack of time and space on the ball. And maybe just, the ball was, I think they mentioned in commentary, a little bit slick as well. But yeah, I find that, how have you kind of ruminated on that center clearance kind of differential in my days since the game? Because I'm still trying to figure it out myself at the moment. And that's just one of the kind of areas I've gone to, is just, not having the right matchups on Harley Reid at times, and then it kind of filters out from there.
Yeah, centre clearance, I think, is the thing that dampens the whole midfield performance the most. Like, all in all, it was a fairly adequate performance. Like you said, Zach sets the bar high, so when he has a downish game, it seems worse. And, I mean, we were admonishing his disposal for most of the game, and he finishes on 63%, which is definitely, in the lower reaches of what he's generally about. Excuse me. But overall, he still has a good game. I understand what you mean about the matchup with him and Reid, and yeah, it was just an interesting kind of subplot to the game. They were clearly in discussion, for want of a better term, for large parts of the game, and maybe it was a bit of bravado on each side, wanting to prove one another wrong or right, or what, whatever perspective you have. But it's interesting with Zach because he is that slight frame, and it's his courage and tenacity that sets him apart. I mean, he ends up with 11 ground ball gets and 17 contested possessions, which kind of says it all. I think he still ends up our top rated player on the field when it's all said and done. So it adds to the high bar that he sets, et cetera, et cetera. The midfield is really interesting at the moment, though, because in an effort to kind of test our depth and whatnot, we're exposing Richards, and we exposed Mead back into the midfield in this game after playing some midfield time for the Magpies and signalling that that's where he kind of wants to play, which is all fair enough. But without a horne-francis in there, just putting Zach Butters to one side, it is very samey. Mead, Drew, Wines, and Richards to an extent can all get a contested ball. They can get a ground ball. Their pressure act numbers look good, and their tackling numbers look. I think it was Joe Richards and Jackson Mead, who led us for tackles at the end of the night. So, yeah, on one hand, it's like, yeah, there's some even contribution. But I think, and look, they did enough to get us a win. We dominated stoppage from around the ground. It was just, center bounce that dampened. But, I think from a midfield point of view, we just want, with the notion of Zach Butters leaving, that X factor. And sure, Rosie can come back in next year, and with the emergence of Josh Lai and Logan Evans bouncing back into form, and hopefully that rolls over to next year, perhaps we will see a Rosie back into the midfield with a lot more percentage of his time, and not necessarily that split between half-backs. So that's where a bit of X factor comes. Who knows what will happen with Miles Bergman, who provides a bit more X factor than your Drews and Meads and Joe Richards. Like, they're all honest players. They're all workmen. And that's where in the modern game, perhaps you don't want too many of them.
Ultimately, you need size and power out of midfield, and that's why, your Patrick Cripps and your Marcus Bonampellis, your Christian Petrarcas, like those guys. I mean, I know I'm talking about a lot of guys that go forward and kick goals as well. I mean, that's where, your Jason Horne-Francis comes into play as well. I mean, lower disposal game for Horne-Francis, but he has a high impact and obviously gets forward and kicks his goals. But he had a few of those. Him and Reed both had plays that were similar, like where they get the ball in the back half of the backside of the center circle and just bounce out of the back half of stoppage and kick forward. And it's just that power and drive, and Butters certainly does that. We love the 1-2 punch between Butters and Horne-Francis. It's that matchup, and they just had some good. They've still got some good size and in their midfield as well. And Tim Kelly gets thrown in there and as well, and
Yo.
he's just Yo was in there as well. I think Yo was like their third most CBAs as well. So just a little bit of size, experience. It's just that centre back, because I think that's where the game is. The reason the game is as close as it is because if we evened up the centre bounce, the centre clearance numbers, like if it had gone, what's that? The 21 centre bounces. So if it had gone 10, 11 or something like that, I just think the game's just that margin where we win more comfortably, because I think that's just a lot of the game comes from the fact that they're able to get some forward momentum from that and get time in forward half. Because when we got into our forward half, we held it there okay there for large periods of that first half. I think at one point in the second quarter, it was like, 68-32 or something like that. Like we were getting, once we were getting down there, it's just, they were getting opportunities out of that. And obviously late in the game, then because the game's close, they press and almost try to find a way back to win it. But but the fact that we're reasonable around stoppage, and I think that's been the story of the last few weeks, or not a few weeks in time, but the last few games we've played, we've had okay stoppage numbers. The centre clearance numbers have been a little bit worse. And, I don't think Jordan Sweet's having bad games at all. I think he's going okay with his ruck work. So it's just that mix and ability to win the ball off the tap and then have the right mix and your matchups right. And you could just see sometimes just Butters again, like Reed would just strength off him and Butters wasn't getting to the ball. And then obviously Reed just his power to drive once he's got the ball is really, really impressive. It's not that they're standout midfield by any means. It was just the matchups were favourable in those situations.
I did notice though on a couple of occasions that Reed actually kind of blatantly held Butters out of the stoppage and benefited from a hit out to a hit zone. And again, the noise of affirmation or the lack thereof when your player's not being perturbed, if you want to use that word. Yeah, and I thought the ruck battle was quite interesting, and it may be the ruck rule on display where Bailey Williams clearly a better jumper than Sweet, and a lot of those moments when they did have momentum, yet like the Williams was hitting it to the hit zone that they've obviously drawn up pre-stoppage, and that's where the likes of Reed in particular benefited. whereas around the ground stoppage, Sweet is clearly the more dominant in that facet of the game. And so you get what you get. Center clearance goes West Coast way because Williams can jump and get it to his hit zones a bit better than Sweet, but Sweet can obviously dominate and around the ground stoppage where a bit of size comes into it. So I still, obviously still believe that Sweet is our number one ruck, and he had a really impressive game. I noticed he got coaches' votes, and he was one of our better rated players on the field at the end of the game. But it's something that
I think, wasn't
he did. Yeah, exactly. And one of those we thought was a goal, but was actually touched. Well, actually, no. It would have been good if it was a goal, but I think I said to you that I'm pretty sure that was touched. Unfortunately, because it would have been fantastic to cheer through another Sweet grab out of the ruck and kick a goal. Because you got to try it. You got to try it.
Yeah.
But it's something that we need to figure out at center stoppage. Because when Sweet does, and this week he doesn't get a let up, because Grundy's a unicorn like that. He's a good jumper and good at the bodywork too. So, but it's something that we need to have contingencies for, because if Sweet does come up against a better jumper at the football, that's where we may find ourselves in the negative on the ledger of center stoppage. And like you've rightfully pointed out, it is so damaging and crucial for score with the setup of the ground at those particular stoppages. So, I don't have all the answers. It may come down to mix, but it may come down to work rate or just keep working at it. You know, this we're not the final product, that's for certain. But yeah, what we can do, I'm not too sure. I noticed that Drew did spend a bit of time with Reed, but again, I think that was more at stoppage around the ground rather than at centre bounce. So another one to ponder over as we move into the next block of games.
Mm-hmm. It was nice to see Joe Richards getting the squirts in there. I still like he's an interesting one because of his frame and everything, but he's certainly he's a very, very smart player and one we've got a lot of love for as far as just his work rate and everything he does around the ground. But it's nice to see. I think he had 48% CBA, so that's a number early in the year you weren't possibly expecting. But I think it could have been like on I think Chad Corns and as mentioned on SEN, like he'd like to see him get some squirts in midfield, I think was the terminology used, and he has been getting them in the last few weeks, and I like just being able to have that option. I mean, it's going to be nice when we do get the likes of your Power Peppers and your Rosies back. Obviously, we're probably looking more at 2027 for Rosie in particular, but I mean, Power Pepper is going to be great to see back, hopefully at the back end of this year, for at least just to get some run in his legs again, all going well. But being the situation we're in, throwing Joe Richards into these situations, I think is a nice little wrinkle to have. I think he has an okay game as well. Actually, a very reasonable game. I enjoyed his game, and I generally do with Richards. If he's getting around the ball and finding some opportunities, he's usually doing some decent things. Sometimes they don't come off. I think, like I said, got caught on the ball at one point, but I do.
Yeah, he's gone at 61%.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. Like, just some of the disposal is probably the thing that dampens the overall mood of the midfield, because, like I mentioned before, predominantly from these workman-like midfielders, their numbers are okay. And maybe Port Adelaide is just okay. But it's the disposal that if they can add that layer, and it was a poor disposal game overall on both sides. But if those just either the decision making or the execution was just lifted by the 5 to 10%, then we're probably looking at the overall midfield a lot more favourably.
Mm-hmm. It is funny looking at, mid guys that played predominantly midfield time that have the higher disposal numbers on the game. That Ollie Wines is the top disposal efficiency player, probably like your Butters, your Horne-Francis, your Richards, your Drews. Drew goes at 70, obviously.
Well, and Wines still had 300 metres gained too.
And only 60% time on ground, which is probably one of those rotation things. It's just like Wines. There's that funny image of Wines just like with his legs crossed, kind of just looking like he's at the library, like on the bench at one point.
Yeah, well, he still had his 60% game time. So he's really like getting managed through this season to that 60% game time.
I think the most I've seen him have
degree.
is 68%. But he's still getting decent numbers. He's probably impacting the game has been the last few weeks. We were probably like, particularly against Carlton, there's some criticism came in. I don't think he has any special highlights in this one, but I do.
I have one. He dropped the best. So horne-francis gets the clearance, kicks it to Ollie Wines, and then the best drop into the pocket of space, I should say, to JHF, who kept running forward. Totally took both of us by surprise in the moment, because it's just like, Ollie Wines, I did not know your game in that regard.
I think I was saying when we were sitting there on the couch, I was saying his eyes are darting, like he's looking for options, but I just didn't realize that one opened up and he dropped it in there perfectly. And I wanted to point that one out because it's just a really nice moment of what we're looking for from some of these guys is like the eyes down and looking for the options and letting the play develop as well. That's what he did. And the fact that the play developed to the point that Horne-Francis, who had delivered the original clearance from the centre to Wines on the 50 line, has then worked his way forward and then found the space. And the cherry on top of that entire play is like the closest player to Horne-Francis was Harley Reid, and Harley's looking around, kind of doing that kind of in the slow motion reel.
Yeah,
like what's going on, guys? Like, even though he was probably the fucking one that was where we should have gone with him. So it's just. Yeah.
And then I think JHF points at him when he kicks the goal too. But before we move on, it would be remiss of us to celebrate the yin, but we have to bring up the yang, or the other way around, for those better in tune with Taoism. Ollie, so we got the good from Ollie, but the bounce from Ollie when he was in space and had options. Don't do that. And I guess that was another characteristic of the midfield, is that perhaps we were trying to move the ball a bit differently at stages through this game. We discussed it in our mid-year review, and it's definitely been a topic from some people who've reached out to us and whatnot. Shout out to Simon, of course, regular contributor in the back end, part of our backhouse team, just about. But it was just obviously the mind spinning and not taking the first option and then getting caught. And perhaps that's a symptom of players trying to take ownership for the chain of possession a bit too much, or just not like the wheels aren't oiled up, if you know what I'm getting at. The cogs are spinning a bit slowly. They're trying to assess all options when, as is the cliche in Australian rules football, the first option is generally the best. And I know from your living room, we could definitely see plenty of first options that weren't being taken, and it was to our detriment. That Ollie Wines bounce and then holding the ball typified that to a T.
Yeah, Simon did send through his usual thoughts, and we always appreciate that, Simon. And he kind of, I think his last one was like, "What the fuck was that from Wines?" And it's just like, it is just a bit like, you probably put it best just there. It's just the wheels spinning and just not like, the cogs kind of just maybe grinding.
I think we had head in hands.
Yeah, we did. It felt like such a good, Wines is taking about, shit. Because it's like, there's a moment where you're like, oh yeah, Wines is on the burst. And he's often often does find.
Yeah, it was out. We had options forward. Yeah. Oh my God, it's a close game.
Yeah, again, 47 to 50,000 fans in the crowd or whatever it was. We're us on TV sitting in armchair quarterback in the game. We're like, oh, you should have fucking we just don't know what it's like to be in that moment, and I'm certainly not going to question the judgment of an Ollie Wines too much with what he's done in his career. But it was just a little bit of a like you said, the cogs grinding a little bit more, and just didn't quite find the option. One more thing on the midfield I wanted to bring up. I found it. I mean, this is an entire game thing, but often this stuff is like midfield centric. Meters gained in the game overall was 5,586 to West Coast, 5,396 for us. So they gained 190 meters more than us. Interesting one about kind of game style, which again is often runs through the midfield. Only 99 of those 5,500 meters gained that West Coast have was by handball, whereas we had 348 meters handball gained. So it's, again, there's small numbers in your macro, but it just shows that West Coast were kind of real surging the ball forward.
Well, and they had more handballs for the game, if I remember correctly, which makes it even more interesting.
That was going to be my next point. It was like they had more handballs, but they weren't gaining the forward momentum by handball. It was kind of like they were setting up, but
interesting.
Then the movements forward was by kicking. So and it was a game that just the pressure was there. It wasn't. It's funny watching the replay. I didn't find it as intense of a replay as I remember it watching on the night, but I still found that West Coast were quite energized in moments of the game, and when they engaged themselves in the game, it was quite tough to find time and space on the ball, and I think we've kind of dropped. Our kick mark game was very, very strong for a few weeks there, but like we've dropped off a little bit in that front, and the dog days of winter hitting. But again, we find a way to win this game, and that's the end thing. And one more thing, contested possession numbers is something we haven't talked about a whole lot this year, like we did the last maybe 2 years of when Port was struggling. And it is nice to see that we're generally is 132 for us, 130 for West Coast, so very a close number. But again, it's nice to be close in these because we had some big losses at times in the last couple of years where contested possession numbers were just woeful. So
20, 30 in the deficit.
Yeah. Some of those efforts were like, I think there was one against the Crows that was just truly horrific, and I think Collingwood as well. It was like 30s, almost 40. I think against one. There was just one that was just diabolically bad. You just kind of looked at the number and was like, that's got to be a typo. But then you check different stats websites, and they're all got the same number, and you're like, it can't be true. So the fact that we're kind of those areas again to the mid-year review, like again, you're setting a baseline for what your build is for the future, and defensive structure and kind of the midfield ethos and tenacity. It's there. It's just it is just youth and disposal. I think Simon in his messages kind of had some criticism for Moraes and McKinlay. I just don't think they got themselves around it was a game that just didn't go through them. And that's sometimes what happens to players on the fringes is you've got your workhorses, guys that get the high possession numbers, similar to an NBA game. If you're going to have your stars get high possessions, but then the ones that are around the fringes, if the game's not going through them, they're just not going to get the numbers. That's why NBA, guy bench players and sixth men and the guys that are the fringe starters, sometimes you'll see a 25, 30-point game. You're like, geez, why isn't that guy getting the ball more? But it's just like, it's because the structure actually just doesn't go through them. So sometimes they get on a heater, but sometimes the game just doesn't go through them. And it just wasn't a game for a McKinlay or a Moraes to have that. I mean, Moraes does, get forward and get a goal. And I don't think I think he's still, what I see on the eye test of how he positions himself on the field, I'm absolutely comfortable with him. It's just like he's just got to build his experience. That goes for McKinlay too. He's had McKinlay's ceiling has risen quite exponentially in the last month because of some really nice performances and goal of the year nominations and all that stuff. So we've got to kind of temper that expectation with those guys and just understand when the game doesn't go through those guys, they're going to have lower numbers. Maybe look like they're struggling a little bit, but I just think, stick fat with them and give them the chance to develop as well, because they're both guys that have played 20 or less games, I think, at this point. McKinlay certainly, Moraes probably is at about that number as well.
Yeah, look, I find I really do find the wing position hard to quantify at times. And McKinlay ends up with 19 pressure acts.
Ed Langdons and Ollie Dempsey's and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And still,
Yeah.
like,
And
yeah,
Western
he's in there.
Bulldogs, Bailey Williams, not to confuse Bailey Williams's. But the Bulldogs do, again, the structure and playing through. They are a higher possession team, so Bailey Williams for Western Bulldogs generally has higher possession numbers than some of our wings. And you're right. There are clearly better wing position players, or so it would seem on a stat sheet for other sides. But I mean, I think even Massimo D'Ambrosio for Hawthorn, his possession numbers generally aren't that high. It's just about what you do with them. But like I said, like McKinlay, his disposal numbers are down. He has 3 score involvements, but he ends the game with 19 pressure acts, which is third best on ground for us. So behind Richards and Drew. So again, and that's like Jacob Ware. Like he's clearly on another wing, but seemed to be helping out in defence a lot. So
yeah.
I'm just a layman nuffy on a podcast, so I do keep my powder dry when it comes to the wings, because some weeks you're like, that's what I expect, and then other weeks you're just like, well, your numbers don't look that good, but like, did the game get played through you, or like were you stuck on the fat side for a lot of the game? And the game, I mean, particularly when we're kicking out from our defensive goal square and we're continually going to one side of the ground, does the wingman on the other side, is he just in no man's land? I really do find it hard to quantify sometimes, and they're clearly not the movers and shakers in Josh Carr's game plan. I don't perceive it to be that way. And on Murray's, he is clearly the last player on the bench, very akin to like 20 years ago, where, like in this game in particular, he's played 56% game time. And it does hark back to, yesteryear, the early 2000s, when, the last player on the bench or the fourth player on the bench would just get a bit of a taste of the football in a game for experience, or if someone comes off injured or something like that. And it seems like he's that player for us. Like he's being picked as the best 23 player, which I think at this point in time he still is. But he ends up with 9 disposals, I think it was, after 56% game time. And like you said, he does kick that goal. So a young player who will probably be a slow burn, and as he gains more maturity and experience, I dare say that time on ground percentage will go up and up and up. But I've seen, he has 7 disposals, sorry, not 9, but splitting hairs a little bit. What I have seen from him by and large over the course of this year when he's played is that relative to his time on ground, his statistics aren't too bad. He just clearly seems to be that last player on the bench, and his minutes are being managed to an extent. One final thing I will say, to go back to your contested topic with our midfield, is I think Fox Footy at the end of the game, flashing through their statistics, I noticed that we beat West Coast in hardball gets. I can't remember the margin, and I didn't screenshot it on this occasion, but it was just nice to see that hardball gets is one facet of contested possession. And for those who are unaware, contested possession is comprised of like 6, 7 or 8 different kinds of possession, whether it be loose ball get, hard ball get, free kicks, contested marks. So I found it quite satisfying. Like you said, our contested numbers overall have been fairly competitive. If we've lost them, definitely if we've won them. But it was nice to see that under that layer of contested possession, hardball gets was one part of contested possession where we did beat West Coast. And I suppose that's another, you could assume that's another aspect of the Josh Carr DNA. It's building a solid defensive foundation, which we're clearly doing quite well in relation to the competition. But knowing Josh Carr like we do, you have to be good in the contest. It was good. It's good to see some signs to say that we're headed in that direction.
Yeah, no, I agree, and the DNA and ethos kind of stuff that we're seeing from the side in the midfield, while it's imperfect and the mixes and all those things that we've just talked about are still to be worked on over the next 12 to 18 months. What we want to see is DNA and ethos working for us, and that's in the underlying things, that's what we're seeing. And I absolutely agree. I was trying to find the Harblegets numbers and I just wasn't finding them, but I do remember seeing that kind of little stat line pop up. And again, watching the replay and seeing the stats, it's just like you have some games where you watch the game and you're like, these are the stats they're going to be looking shocking, and there's some that actually don't look as bad as I was expecting. But then obviously it really is just the turnover numbers and center clearance numbers that were kind of the ones that kept West Coast in the game essentially, and we still win. So and we win with not a perfect forward line performance, as has been more or less the story of Port Adelaide footy this year, but we still do obviously kick a score. Very, very similar. I think I talked about it in the mid-year review, and I've talked about it a couple of times. We have scored in the 70s to 80 range for probably 75% of the season. It has been a very, very similar story every week as far as the score we're putting on the scoreboard against decent opposition a lot. Maybe West Coast aren't counted as decent opposition, but I think they're one of those bad teams that can be challenging. That's what they've got themselves to the point of being this year, which is a good thing for their development, and also a nice matchup for us, being some of the stars they've got. And down forward, Jason Horne-Francis obviously has a big game and gets forward and kicks his 3 goals. We don't get a great Mitch Georgiades. I think Mitch Georgiades has a great game as far as what he does up the field. He doesn't have quite as much joy down forward. So I think he actually has a good game. It's just not the 10 shots on goal Mitch Georgiades we've seen it a couple of times this year. It's and he has 3 shots, I think, actually. Just looking at just trying to find my stats here.
Goal
3
2.
shots on goal. Yeah. So Jason Horne-Francis has more shots on goal than him and Durden. It was funny though. We I think both starting on this and shout out to Travis Wakeling. We'll call it the Corey Durden corner in this moment. And this goes for Mitch Georgiades as well. They both missed gettable shots early. And I think
I know.
And then obviously we get to halftime. We get to halftime and we haven't seen either of them kick a goal yet. And I'm thinking, and then the way the game was being played, it was just like, it was obviously tough and nuggety and a little bit, hard to get opportunities at times, for clear-cut opportunities. And I just thought, shit, are we going to see one or both streaks ended tonight? Because, Mitch Georgiades.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Game. But, there's going to be all streaks come to an end. That's the whole point of streaks. But we do obviously get Durden kicking a goal eventually, and Georgiades obviously gets his goal in general play, which is funny enough that the one goal of the game he kicks was a general play goal. I don't think he's had a game this year where his only goals have come from general play, so that's a little statistical nugget. But I think Durden actually has, for a small forward in a tough game, I think he has a very, very good game. He contributes up in the midfield area or on out on the outside areas on the wings. Is down half back at times, winning ball and getting ball out. Of course, he gets forward and finally gets his goal. He does miss an opportunity that we're already this year we've been more or less inclined to think he's going to kick. He also misses one from general play that you'd hope he kicks, but he gets his 3 shots as well. Again, kicks 1 goal 2. You hope for 2 goals 1 more often than not. 3 goals straight would be great, but they both. It's still nice to see you Durden and Georgiades get 6 shots between them, and of course, you'd hope for a bit better conversion. But then, Jason Horne-Francis goes forward and kicks 3 goals, so that kind of helps out in that area. And ably supported by a few others. Tommy Cochran and Joe Berry both show a lot in this game as well.
That's exactly right. And I think while the missed opportunities we generally focus on and we're, waxing lyrical about, and if we're ever going to kick straight as Port Adelaide Football Club, but the scoring efficiency is actually quite good. So that's what hurts more in recent weeks where we haven't been able to move the ball, because I think throughout our games, once we get it into our forward third, our scoring efficiency is actually we're at 53% scoring efficiency. That's not goal efficiency, obviously, but shots at goal we're actually getting. And I still think that is due to the fact that our coaching group are trying to instill a best option policy. And by that, I mean, go for the best option, not go for one player. And I know that Mitch Georgiades has been targeted, I think Tom Hawkins said 3 times more than the next person in our forward line. And I do genuinely believe that's because of his work rate. Yeah, exactly. If he's the best option, you're going to take it. That's okay. Yeah, but then, he's just too good. He's too good.
No, continue. You're right, though. It is his forward craft makes him that best option often.
He does, and that's why he is a superstar forward, and he should be getting himself in to All-Australian discussions, but he won't be, predominantly due to his profligacy in front of goal. But you finish the game with Jeff on 3 goals, Joe Berry under the radar, 2 goals, and the 2 goals that he did kick, the snatch and grab for his opener was sensational, and that's the nugget of gold that we're continually panning for. Todd Marshall
phoned by the umpires when was it Basso?
100%, 100%, and that's again the reverse noise of affirmation. Like if that was a West Coast player, you can guarantee they'd be having a shot from the top of the goal square. That was egregious. And again, commentary kind of touched on it, but again, moved along quickly.
Just over it. They just started talking about Basso's defensive, like that's what he does. It's like, fuck no, that's not what he should be doing. What are we talking about?
Front on contact, chops the arms, or get someone in the head. Like, take your pick out of one of those 3, because you could be, just seeing umpires pay all 3 of those in those situations. But,
he hits the post from another one as well, or just misses,
I think from a general play situation.
Yeah, and very low percentage chance, but actually got very close to scoring. So you look at the 2 goals he scored, you look at that one that's close, and then you go, well, should have had a free kick from there. Sliding doors and butterfly effect, as we like to talk about. You can easily say there's a 4-goal game there if things go slightly differently. But his efforts for the 2 goals and his efforts around the ground once again, I thought were very, very good from Berry.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely taking the 2 goals, because I guess that was the biggest note on him, maybe in our corner of the world, was that, we didn't really have a focus on him working himself up the ground and whatnot in maybe our preseason discussions and early season discussions. It was just we wanted to see him hit the scoreboard more than we particularly saw in his games last year, in his debut season. And it seems to be something that he's now generating more opportunities of in recent months. So, I'm absolutely taking it. And, what have we got for our 2 forwards? Todd Marshall kicks 1 goal, but he also has a goal assist. Yeah, we've already touched on Mitch Georgiades, 1 goal, 2, 1 goal assist. And then Jack Whitlock just has the 1 shot on goal. So he's in a lean run. Not sure if he's at risk of getting dropped, though, because he still shows those athletic qualities that you want, and we have a bit of a license to play him and give him experience. But just to finish off on that, Tom Cochrane, what a return to football. He also has the 1 goal too. He actually had 4 shots on goal, I think all in the first quarter, and one of them dropped short and ended up being rushed behind, so it doesn't count to his tally. So in reality, he kicked 1 goal 3. Just a bit of an annoyance in parts of games, and then he finishes with 3 goal assists as well. So when they talk about X Factor and whatnot, I guess that's a perfect example of what he's capable of. And some of his work up the ground was also good. I know there was one passage of play where there was a bit of chaos ball, but he just palms it and takes it with one hand, puts it under his arm and jets off. And that,
He also had
hearing what we've heard,
assist, push forward. He had some moments where it's just like there's football knowledge there and understanding of situational football that was really, really impressive from him.
Yeah, for such an inexperienced player, he does show that just general footy nous that gives you those extra seconds in contests, or just shows you that. And a bit like Corey Durden, to be honest, it's what I was going to say before. Whenever he gets the football, it seems like he's already summed up the next step. And then when he gets the ball, he acts upon it. That his work up the ground in this game, and the disposal efficiency, again, I don't think looks too favourably for him. 58.3% for Corey Durden. I think that probably casts a more negative shadow over his overall game, because I thought his game overall was quite impressive. And it is that if he's working up the ground and working it back forward, sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, but you know what I'm getting at. It seems like, he's already assessed the next step. And I mean, that's what we've revered in players of the past, such as, a Robbie Gray, for example, who is probably the gold standard from a Port Adelaide point of view, just always seemed a couple of steps ahead of everyone else when he's got the ball. And I see that in Corey Durden. I've seen that throughout the whole year, and it's why he generally ends up with those goal assists that we so regularly see him getting, on top of, his work at goal in his own regard. And then, Tom Cochrane, to go back to him, he seemed to show that attribute on a few occasions. He knew what he wanted to do. He just needed to get the football first. And then when he got the football, it was acting upon those with a bit of pizzazz, a bit of X factor.
Yeah. There's even he had a couple of really nice goal assists, obviously, where he just got the ball forward into space and to the advantage of, whether it be Mitch Georgiades or, in particular, I think our last goal of the game, which was the horne-francis third goal, it kind of goes forward. It's just after the commentators had talked about Port Adelaide being all out of position up forward, but then we get the ball forward and actually do break the West Coast lines and have numbers forward of the ball. And Cochrane gets the ball, and Horne-Francis is breaking into the 50, and he holds off the handball to Horne-Francis until the defender has to commit to Cochrane, right to the point that he's about to tackle Cochrane.
As he should.
And he dishes the handball forward. Horne-Francis has space. The other West Coast player, whoever it was, running into 50 is just miles away. And so the only player that could have gotten to Horne-Francis is the one that goes to Cochrane. And it's just like Cochrane's, as it's very simple football stuff, but it's still just the ability to take the ball, recognize the moment, dish off a good handball to the advantage of Horne-Francis, and Horne-Francis, kicks a goal that ultimately is the winning goal when you think about the way the game went in the next 10 minutes after that. So, nice.
Would have loved Burgoyne's kick to be the winning goal. That's a really put it beyond doubt, but unfortunately not.
Unfortunately, we just it was just continued to be squeaky bum time for another minute or so after that. So that is our lot in life as Port Adelaide fans this year. It is a lot of squeaky bums. But I'm really, really pleased with just all of that small forward craft from a lot of young players. Durden's been around for a few years, obviously at Carlton, but he's still a relatively young player. Joe Berry's obviously very raw and young. Cochrane as well. What it's fifth game after a long injury layoff. Good signs from all of them, and good signs of intelligent football from all of them, which is what I'm actually looking for as they develop. Is like just their ability to understand and read the field of play is the ultimate thing. And all three of them showed me some of those signs in this game. And obviously, they all 4 goals between them as well in a tight game. So you got to take that and run with it. And obviously, Jason Horne-Francis again as our leading goal kicker on the night. Not a great. Oh, one more thing maybe. It's not a game that Todd Marshall had a lot of it, but he had a moment. I can't remember who was kicking the ball. Was it did he pick out? I think he might have picked out Horne-Francis for Horne-Francis' first goal. Again, letting the play develop and finding the pass. I thought, he kicks one goal, doesn't get a whole lot of the ball, but I thought it was
he's also on managed minutes too. Oddly enough, he was only at the 68% mark.
Yeah. But I think an inauspicious but not unpromising forward foray for Marshall again. It's a game that, again, was a little bit funky for the forwards, and that's partly because of our disposal. But I'm pleased with him forward again, and I think I'm looking forward to when the game, maybe when we play a bit cleaner and he gets a little bit more involved for what he can do. Obviously, he has a very, very nice finish for his goal and had a couple of moments of smart play. Again, like I said, the goal assist for what I believe was the Horne-Francis goal. Those kind of things are what are promising about what Todd Marshall can do going forward.
Yeah, and I think there was a moment when we were going to the right-hand side of the screen. So I can't remember what quarter that would be, but it was where Jace Burgoyne kicked it out to the flank, and then it ended up being a lasso. And I think it was Tom Hawkins recognised that Marshall actually made a decent lead and gained some separation, and had Burgoyne actually just taken the 15-metre kick or whatever it was, Marshall would have been kicking from maybe 45 metres out. So he's clearly doing, he's a forward at heart, so he knows what he needs to do. And it's just the reintegration back into a forward setup that has been kind of progressing without him for most of the season so far. But yeah, I'm still happy for him to stay there. You want to see his goal or scoring contributions increase or become a bit more regular, at that 2 or 3 shots on goal mark, and to seal the deal. But I'm happy for him to stay. Him being there obviously frees up other players because he kind of demands a fairly decent defender. But just looking again at our goal tally at this point in the season, Mitch Georgiadis on 28, Durden 18, Jason Horne-Francis 17, and Jack Whitlock on 13, although that has slowed down. So we've got that pack of players. I guess overall we just want that extra layer of contribution from, we want a few more goal kickers on the board, and we want our goal kickers to flip their accuracy, to increase that score from week to week. Because if we're moving the ball, we're getting scoring opportunities. That is kind of obvious throughout the season. We need that goal conversion to be a lot better.
Yeah. Like I said, that expected score could have been closer to 90 if we'd done a little bit better on that front, which probably would have been a little bit more reflective of some of those promising moments. So that's what. Yeah, I'm excited about what this forward line can possibly do with the addition of Cochrane up there and Marshall going forward. Still going to be some imperfect results, but there's some excitement to be had, despite the fact we've got a tough run of games coming up. The re-injection of Marshall up there, the likes of Cochrane going up there, and I think the continued improvement of Berry is going to provide us some moments of joy and excitement for the future in the coming weeks. Do you have anything else on the game, Jamie? I know we're getting close to getting the segments, so and it's been some good good chat amongst the lines there. I've enjoyed that. But anything else at the moment, or we're happy to move on to the segments?
Nah, let's get into the segments, shall we?
Segments. Before we get into it, just a reminder to you all listening. It's probably preaching to the choir. But if you haven't followed us on all the socials, make sure you're getting around those to keep up with us, keep in touch with us, whether it be on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Find the Creed on there and follow us and enjoy the content. As well as if, even though you're listening regularly, watching regularly on YouTube, I'm sure you're doing these things, but we'd appreciate you subscribing on Spotify, on Apple Pods, whatever your preferred podcast platform is, as well as if you're on YouTube, liking the videos every time you see them. Likes and subscribes on all of these platforms helps build and share the podcast to other people in their algorithms. We're still a very, very small podcast in the grand scheme of things. So every share, every like, and everything like that does help us out, being that we are very, very organically grown. It's all word of mouth and just the algorithm working for us. So, I appreciate, but we do appreciate all the support. The regulars, they get in touch with us. We love the support and really, really appreciate you all, and look forward to catching up for beers with all of you at future games. But without further ado, let's get to the segments, of which, of course, we always start with the Wilson Gray.
Down, Gray doing brilliantly, getting through to Monfries. That's Gray at his best.
Wilson kicks hard and kicks truly.
Robbie! Let him entertain you!
All right, the Wilson Gray Award, of course, the award given to efforts on the ground outside of goal scoring opportunities, of course, that we enjoy on the field, and had a good one this week for my nomination. I get to go first this week, of course. We rotate who goes first. I don't know what Jamie's going to pick. He doesn't know what I'm going to pick, so whoever's going first does get the pick of the bunch, so to speak. Last week, 2 weeks ago, so we have, of course, had the bye week. So the last winner of the vote on Instagram, of course, the Instagram stories, this is being recorded on Tuesday the 9th. The Instagram stories on the evening of Wednesday the 10th will have the votes, the video package of the ones to vote for in there. So get around the Instagram page under _ the Creed on Instagram to vote for your pick. Do appreciate the regulars that just get involved every week. We do love it. So the winner from the game against Carlton before the bye for the Wilson Gray was Corey Durden's tackle on Billy Wilson. 86%, a very, very comfortable win for Corey Durden's tackle. Over my nomination of just Josh Ly's intercept early in the game, which there was obviously a few of those, but which I very, very much enjoyed. But the Corey Durden moment in a game that didn't have too much to write home about was a comfortable winner. So there we go. Speaking of Corey Durden, he's getting my nomination again. More Durden corner. I'm gonna have to fucking find a way to timestamp every one of these for our friend of the pod, Travis Wakeling. But my nomination is about the back end of the second quarter, I believe it was. Corey Durden had a run on the wing that involved winning the ball, handballing off to Jack Whitlock, who then handballed back to Corey Durden. A nice 1-2 play along the wing that then was a delivery inside 50. That actually eventually ended up in Joe Berry's second goal. But Corey Durden, a 1-2 on the wing with Jack Whitlock, I think about 5.5 minutes to go in the second quarter, is my nomination.
Burn Jones. A long kick out towards Durden. Did really well to take it with one hand and releases Whitlock. Durden wants it back and Whitlock will provide it. Open forward line. He's got a one-on-one inside 50. Georgiades doubles back. And from end to end, the power connect. Last season, any player going down now, they stop the play for a while.
Yeah, I'll let you and Scoey squabble over what you're going through at the moment, Simo. But I saw it on Friday night with Mitch Lewis. He rolled his ankle.
Fucking loved it. I love a good, clean handballing 1-2 movement that just looks silky. And Corey Durden was every fucking bit of silk in that moment.
He was, and yeah, Jack Whitlock showing that bit of athletic chain of possession prowess to George, and then our boy Joe Berry ending up with the goal. So, yeah, great moment in the game. Very scrappy game, but I found a little bit difficult to build a short list, funnily enough. But I guess my nomination will go to Joe Richards, who at the start of the third quarter chases Harley Reid, who is bursting away from a centre bounce or a centre ball up, I should say. But Joe Richards just gets him in the nick of time to affect the kick, which mongrels into the West Coast forward 50, which makes it a little bit easier for us to defend. So a good chase from Joe Richards, spending time in the midfield, of course.
He's his runner kicking a goal in every game this season. Delightful hit out down to Harley Reid, bursting out of the middle. Terrific chase by Richards, affected the kick. Murdoch.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. And a very, very good pick from you. That was actually on my short list before I realised I was going first. I was obviously building a short list, and that was definitely on there. I think the Durden one was quickly at the top of mine, but once I did my pod packet, I was like, I'm going first, so the Durden one's on there. But that's Joe Richards' chase was is quintessential Wilson Gray kind of areas for us. Putting in that maximum effort to just affect a kick, because you never know what's going to happen. And ultimately we did, after a few moments there, we did win the ball and get it out. Whereas, if Harley Reid has a clear line inside 50 from that burst that he had would have been, possibly a much more damaging kick. And for Joe Richards to kind of have that tenacity to just keep going with Harley Reid, which, he could be forgiven for maybe just being like, I'm not going to catch this motherfucker, but he just does that just enough to affect the kick. So, yeah, real Wilson Gray areas, I think. So a very, very good nomination.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree.
Looking forward to what the people pick, because they're two moments that are there's no mark in there, there's no holding the ball tackle. It's two just run with moments in different ways. So I'll be looking forward to seeing what people pick. I know what Travis Wakeling's going to pick, but everyone else, I'm not sure. Number one ticket holder in the Corey Durden fan club. All right, let's get to the goal of the week nominations.
Monfries has kicked a goal. Unbelievable. Haven't seen anything like that. It's gone at right angle.
Flashpoint, Stevie Modler, what a time! On air now.
All righty, goal of the week. Jamie gets to go first this week, but first the nominations, the win from last game against Carlton, a lot closer here. But Jamie's nomination of Snap Whitlock, Whitlock's goal around the corner, up on the at the northern end there, right in front of the scoreboard there, right in front of us, over Todd Marshall's set shot that I nominated with 44% of the vote. So a close one, but Snap Whitlock wins the vote from the Carlton game in round 11. Jamie, you get to go first here. I'm interested to see what you go with.
A few nice ones from the night, but I think I'm going to go with Joe Berry's initial goal in the first quarter, where he preys on the contest and then just in the nick of time. I've used that in both my nominations, that phrase, so apologies for the repeat, but snatches the ball at the right moment, snaps on goal, and before you know it, we got 6 points on the board. So Joe Berry, snatch and grab job for me.
Strong tackle on me. Needing some physicality. Bazzo back there. Marek, the power, pressure. They cause the turnover, and Berry gets the quick reply.
An opportunity to clear the area, perceived pressure, pass the problem on to someone else, and they get hurt with another turnover in their D50. So a bit of work to do from a backline point of view if you're West Coast. There was enough pressure there for them.
Yeah. Top of my shortlist as well. And a very, very good finish. One of those ones that speaks to kind of his quickness of hand to foot and all those areas that he's developing quite well, I think, this year. Just quietly humming along. The draft bust that Joe Berry is. I say that facetiously, of course, in case anyone wants to misconstrue that. But he's developing very, very nicely. He's got 9 goals in the year now. Obviously just a touch below a goal a game, but his input into scoring has definitely increased over the probably last 6 weeks or so. So Yeah, very, very. And just a nice goal. And to be in those positions to score those ones means you have to understand what's going on in the game. And he's doing that a lot recently.
Yeah, absolutely. It was nice. It was quick. Again, some of those gold nuggets that, I mentioned we're panning for. Just slick. It was slick, which is nice. We want.
Yeah. And a game that somewhat was devoid of moments of slickness. It was very, very nice. Well, my nomination, there's a few honourable mentions. I thought about nominating Tommy Cochrane's goal just because it was a nice finish from a set shot. Not the easiest
Welcome back
to score from. It would have been. I was close to nominating it, but the goal that I'm going to nominate is going to be one that does have a fair bit of Tommy Cochrane on it. And it is actually one we talked about somewhat earlier. And when we were talking about the forward line, Jason Horne-Francis' goal in the fourth quarter off the Tommy Cochrane assist, I thought was, just Jason Horne-Francis getting himself into position, receiving the handball, and finishing on the run. Looks a relatively academic finish, but we've seen plenty of moments like that go awry for both us and other teams across the league. So it was ultimately the goal that kept us at bay enough to win the game, and was very, very well set up and very, very well finished by Jason Horne-Francis.
On that little battle and gets it moving for his team. Now they are right the way out, Port Adelaide. Cochrane, if they just work it out, it'll sit for them. Horne-Francis, Cochrane, timed as steady and bury the goal. Great counter-attacking footy from the power.
And it was right there for the picking. So Port had their numbers up, obviously helping get back in defence, but a brilliant one-on-one contest. Or maybe even outnumbered by Butters, just being able to take the contact and get the ball forward. And it was a lovely finish. Nice composure from the Hornet. And a much-needed score.
Yeah, great call. I actually didn't have it on my shortlist, but that's because I was just enjoying it in the moment. And it's definitely front of mind, that's for sure. So, yeah, misstep there in my preparation. But, yeah, just a timely goal. Yeah, it wasn't necessarily about the sexiness of the goal or anything like that. It was just game situation, just the fact that we turned it over and we'd finally broken through. So, yeah, great nomination from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that clutch gene that we love about Jason Horne-Francis that goes into that one as well. It's like knowing the moment, cometh the moment, cometh the man. Jeff! Yeah, a lot of Jeff from the couch on Saturday nights. All right, interested to see how the people go with both of those segments because I think there's a lot to love about both. Fucking Jack Revolt and his laptop. That's got people fucking talking this week. Alrighty. Let's get to the Player of the Year votes because this one's going to be. Are we going to Yahtzee again? I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm interested to see.
We'll wait and see.
Now it's time for the CREEDCAST Player of the Year voting. If anyone watching on YouTube was just seeing me look very, very confused, it's just like my deck just froze for a second. I'm hitting the sting button. I'm just like, it's not working. Felt like fucking Zoolander when they're trying to get the files out of the computer. I was just like, Anyway, it eventually worked, of course. You heard the sting. Player of the Year votes, of course, every week. Jamie and I take it in turns as to who goes first. We don't know what the other votes are until we read them out on air. And as I mentioned before, Yahtzeeing does happen. We're always very, very impressed with ourselves when that happens because we don't talk about this at all going into it. We both know each other fairly well at this point and know our proclivities as far as what players do, but we still do enjoy it when we Yahtzee. But I'll be interested to see if we do this week. My votes, of course, we do 5 through 1 voting, 5 being best on ground, 1 being 5th best on ground. So we start at the one vote spot here. And I've thrown DBJ into my 1 vote. 24 disposals, which is actually second best on ground for us, 79% disposal efficiency, 497 metres gained, 4 marks, 9 rebound 50s, which is by far best for Port and equal with Tom McCarthy for best on ground. And the 18 pressure acts, which is fourth best for Port, six ground ball gets as well. And just had some nice creative moments out of the back half in a game that's and it's been a struggling area for us as a whole. And the fact that he's gone back, as we've talked about earlier, in the last 6 weeks or whatever, and after being a forward for the last 2 to 3 years, I thought it's just a quite impressive performance again, just showing some quiet leadership, sacrificing whatever he needs to do for the team. And obviously we know that he's an all-Australian halfback in previous iterations of his career, so it's not like it's unfamiliar territory for him, but he has been moved around a lot in the last few years, and he just continues to work hard for the team and do what needs to be done, and at a reasonably high level. So I appreciate his performance. He had a couple of turnover moments and a few moments in the game. He's never perfect, but I actually think his overall game deserves a reward, because I was just quite impressed with the fact that he's gone back there and he's actually one of the main leaders and creators out of the back half at the moment, in an area that we're struggling with in the last month or so. So yeah, DBJ gets my 1 vote. It's going to be defenders heavy voting for me this week, because I've got Aaliyah at my 2 votes. He doesn't have he's not the standout defender on the day, but I think the structure of our defense just, we don't have the game we do without Aaliyah down there. He has the 12 disposals at 75%, 5 marks, 5 1%ers, 9 intercept possessions. Of course, has 100% time on ground, and I just think Asava Radaglia doesn't have the game he does if Aaliyah's not like his, whoever's Batman, whoever's Robin. You can, I'll let that discussion go to others. But there's a real Batman and Robin aspect to the performance of those two down back and how the structure of our defense works. So it's probably teasing forward, but Asava is going to pop up later in the votes. But I don't think Asava is able to do that without what Aaliyah does. And I thought I wanted to reward that what Aaliyah does as well. And I think, as we touched on earlier as well, I think a few of his moments where Jake Waterman gets the best of him, and I say that with quotations, is partly because he gets burned by the umpires a little bit. So I think Aaliyah has a very, very good game and deserves to be in the discussion of the best 5 players on the field. Zach Butters in my 3 votes. Not the quintessential Zach Butters game, but I think he does a lot of things. Disposal a little bit off, as we talked about, but he has a 27 disposals, 17 contested, which is a heavy number, and just goes to show the kind of game that he was having to have an impact on the game. 7 clearances. I think it was 2 from centre, 5 from stoppage, which I think was the exact same numbers that Jordan Sweet had as well. He has a 17 pressure acts, was sixth best for Port, 11 ground ball gets, which is first on ground for all teams. So his work was very, very underrated, but he did a lot of hard work. There's the 4 score involvements, a couple 1%ers. Again, like I said, not the highlight Zach Butters game, so to speak. A few of those moments where he tries the Zach Butters disposal and it just doesn't come off, and it just was one of those games for him. But what we love about Zach Butters is the fact that he does try the untryable things, and some of his disposals that do come off in other weeks are just out of this world kind of kicks, little sideways ones, and the way he can stop and start and prop and go is incredible. Just doesn't quite come off for him in this game, but he still has a game good enough to get into the best players and have an impact on the game. That's why he's an in-demand player that he is like there's multiple ways he can impact the game, and you have to be accountable for him. And he does get a few unfair ones. The 50 from the Liam Baker one earlier in the game we hadn't actually touched on yet, but that was bullshit. Liam Baker deliberately kicked him in the face. I'll fucking go. All right. I'm very, very adamant on
you're
that.
convinced.
And then I think Harley Reid gives him a solid punch to the face after a little bit of fracas in the game as well. So it was an interesting game. Very chippy as well. We haven't touched on that, but very, very chippy game. Of course, Zach Butters was right in the thick of it. So his impact on the game, I think, was very there was a lot of vibes about what Zach Butters was bringing to the game. And of course, his stats line still backs up that he had a reasonable game. So 3 votes to Butters. My 4 votes goes to Jason Horne-Francis. He only has the 18 disposals. So you look at that and go, well, Butters had 9 more, but I think just the impact on the game that Jason Horne-Francis has is what makes him the special player that we all are just so excited to watch for the next decade. 72% disposal efficiency, 4 clearances. He has the 6 score involvements, 3 goals, of course, 6 marks, 2 of those being inside 50. I just think he had one of those games where his impact, I was surprised to see the only 18 disposals when I looked at the scoreline, because you just felt his presence in the game a lot. And whether it be his sparring with Harley Reid at times or just obviously his goals and impact around the ground, he's a player that just demands attention. And I think his impact on the game, while may not be reflected in champion data, player ratings or other areas where, Butters obviously being a top-rated player, I just think Jason Horne-Francis' impact on the game was just that little bit more, and gets the 4 votes. And of course, best on ground, getting the 5 votes, just like both coaches gave him, Esava Ratugolea, which is just incredibly impressive considering the kind of, reputation he had maybe 12, 18, 24 months ago, whatever it may be. He's turned his career, turned around what people think of him. Most football knowers, trolls on the side, we'll leave them to the side. But 16 disposals, 75% efficiency, 9 marks, 4 of those contested. He had the 12 intercept possessions, 4 tackles, 8-1 percenters, and finishes the game with a bandaged head, as I talked about earlier, which just rounds out the aesthetically pleasing, Rock of Gibraltar kind of fucking performance down back. That's just, when you have a performance like that, and you end the game with a fucking bandaged head, it just wraps it up in a nice bow for me, and just as just the vibes. And I just think there's no doubt. I'm really, really pleased that he got the perfect 10 from the coaches. I was already had him locked in as my best on ground myself. And when I saw that he got the perfect 10 from the coaches, I was just like, that's really cool that Esava Ratugolea can go home and just be like, there's a perfect 10 in my career there. I can't remember. I don't think he got one last year. I think he had a few coaches' votes last year, but I don't know if he ever got a perfect 10. I could be wrong. Maybe he has got one in his career already, but I felt like a marked moment in his career. Either way, it's really, really cool that that's the kind of level he can get to now. And I think that's he's starting to show more and more that that's a consistency that he has when he's fit. And I'm very, very pleased that Esava Ratugolea is a Port Adelaide player, and long may it continue.
Yeah, agreed. Great votes by you. No Yahtzee, I will say off the top, but some honourable mentions must go to Jace Burgoyne for mine. Stats look pretty good across the board. 24 disposals, except for his disposal efficiency. But another just under the radar. Yeah, he started the season actually fairly poor disposal, and then I felt like he remedied that. But he's got the 500 meters gain, 5 marks, and 4 score involvements. So yeah, he's got some nice little markers, if you will, across the board, and he obviously has that shot late, which we all definitely wish that he had kicked to put us a bit more at ease. I've actually got Aaliyah as my honourable mention. Unfortunately, didn't squeeze him in. But as well as that, I had Tommy Cochran in at 1 vote at one stage, but he's been bumped out to an honourable mention as well, purely for the 4 shots on goal and 3 direct goal assists is no mean feat by any stretch of the imagination. But in a similar vein, I've got Corey Durden as my 1 vote. He had 12 disposals, 309 metres gained. He took 3 marks. He kicked the 1 goal too, like we said. He had the 1 goal assist. And it was the 7 score involvements for me. Like I said, his disposal efficiency paints a different picture to the effect on the game that I think he had. And I thought he was deserving of 1 vote at least. So Corey Durden, I've got DBJ in at 2 for me. And shout out to Dennis Carey, who messaged us over the weekend to kind of highlight DBJ and hoping that we would highlight DBJ. So I hope we're doing him service, Dennis, because as he said, obviously DBJ is a bit of the Jasper Pittard of our side and tends to garner negative opinions, warranted, but also unwarranted at a lot of points in the season. And I thought it was a good overall game, a good leaders game from DBJ. And like you mentioned, yeah, a couple of turnovers. I think everyone had their clanger moments. He actually, there was quite a few slick handballs from DBJ that I quite enjoyed. A bit of spin, 5Ds of dodgeball type stuff. And you've read out his stats already, so they kind of speak for themselves. It's just a good overall halfbackers game. And, you know, perhaps without his leadership down back, maybe we do kind of fall in a bundle late. We're not to know, but I thought, similarly to Jace Burgoyne, he's kind of going under the radar a little bit. Just, again, another workman. We're a team full of workmen at the moment, and he's definitely one of them. And I thought, yeah, definitely deserving of votes. My 3, 4, and 5 are exactly the same as yours. Butters at 3. Before I did my vote, after we watched the game live, like I think our mood in the room was kind of like, I struggle to get Butters in due to his lack of disposal efficiency. But yeah, again, it's mainly due to the high bar that he sets for himself. And then when you just kind of simmer down and watch a replay and take everything into account, he still plays a pretty good game. And the flow-on effect of having Zach Butters on the field is immeasurable. Jeff, yeah. Interesting discussion just off the back of Butters that, you know, maybe it's, again, conditioning for Butters to leave, but there's the discussion of, you know, 18 JHF disposals more effective than, you know, 25 Zach Butters disposals. Maybe a bit of an unfair discussion, but I could definitely have the viewpoint that JHF's 18 disposals and 3 goals are much more impactful than some other players in the competition's 25 to 30. So it's an interesting discussion in regards to Jason Horne-Francis, which I look forward to that type of thing continuing, because then when you take into account that he's had, 30 disposal games and, you've really known his impact, it's tantalising moving forward. And Asava Radikalia, like you said, very pleased that he's on our side of things. The headband at the end, while you've been mentioning it throughout the pod, it's kind of giving me turn of the century Wallabies type vibes, you know, get in there and flick it around, bash and crash Asava. But yeah, that tandem, like I said in our mid-season review, just the spine of our team, it looks healthy when you go Alir, Asava, Sweet and Ruck, you know, take your pick, your Butters, JHF, from a centre point of view, Georgiadis and Marshall Whitlock. Like, it's just a healthy spine that you can build off of. So Asava, one of his better games in Port Adelaide colours. Again, opposition considered, but like I said, you play the opposition that's put in front of you, and if you have an edge on them, you play into that as much as you can, which he did. And the coaches saw it the way that I guess a lot of us saw it. So hopefully that form continues, and hopefully it's just another step in the direction of a positive perception of Asava Radikalia, because I definitely think that he adds a positive to our defensive mix.
Yeah, he does. I think it's undeniable now that he's your second in charge beyond Alir. Like, Alir is still the general, but you know, Asava has now got a body of work over the last 18 months that just says, you know, when he's fit, he plays. And that's
he's just a gun contested Mark II, and like X Factor players, and I'm
really
not necessarily
see that.
It's good to have something that you can hang your hat on. And you know, I'm not saying that Asava Radikalia is necessarily an X Factor player, but seeing him sitting atop the contested mark stats typically every week is just very pleasing to see, because it just gives you that comfort that if you're in a bind or if he's in a contested situation, you're pretty confident that he can, at a minimum, halve that, if not take the mark in a contest.
Exactly. Yeah. No, very, very, very pleased and looking forward to hopefully seeing him have just hopefully an injury-free run, knock on wood, as we do, back into the year and just kind of build towards, the next 2 to 3 years for us as well, because he's going to be a very, very important player for us as this kind of transitional period continues if he can stay fit. So, very, very excited and glad that, he gets the perfect 10 from us, perfect 10 from the coaches. What a week for Osava Radaglia. he's had a great one.
Fuck yeah. Good on him.
Yeah. And he's gonna have a big test this week as we come up, as we close off this episode, and just touch on the fact that we play the Sydney Swans at Adelaide Oval on at 7:05 p.m. I believe it is on Saturday evening. So of course we'll be doing our full spectrum squad show on Thursday evening, releasing Friday. It doesn't get much tougher than the Sydney Swans, though. Maybe beyond Fremantle at the moment. Sydney are playing some good footy and a very, very strong side, and one of the top 4 contenders, and ipso facto a premiership contender via that. So, and we're dealing with a couple of little injuries. Obviously, the major one out of the weekend, and one we didn't touch on too much in the review, but disappointing to see Josh Lai go down with another concussion. So he goes out of the side, obviously, in protocols. And Jack Lukosius, who isn't in the side, obviously, right now, but it was coming back to the Sandful as a shoulder niggle. So there's, whether he comes back at all or not, I actually don't think he will, based on the fact if he's getting another niggle, they're probably just going to, I think that it's a slow burn kind of thing with Jack Lukosius at this point, particularly with how the side is set up. So, but the one big one I'm interested from you, Jamie, it's obviously talked about in the media a bit, and I talked about it on the little episode I did about the mid-season draft. People are loving Xavier Bammett at the club already. Had a decent Sandful debut for us. Our mid-season draftee, of course, had number 1 pick. Our pick, the pick 5 in the mid-season draft, in Xavier Bammett, and I'm really keen to see him play, and I'm interested to see how you feel about that possible prospect maybe this week.
I'm keen to see him play. Yeah, I am not necessarily sure that he would come in this week, unless because it seemed to me that he played in the forward mix for the Maggies, obviously kicking the 2 goals, which is awesome for him on debut for us. So with that in mind, I'm just not 100% sure who they would drop to facilitate him coming in. If they were to go, maybe we'll try you on a wing and see if you can pinch it forward, there's probably an argument to be had that why not? So that's always there. But I'm definitely keen. I'm definitely keen to see him before the season's out. That's for sure. Provide with a bit of time under his belt, learning our system. Because the highlights look good. I agree with everything that you said in that bonus pod. He seems mature, but beyond his 19 years, and very down to earth. He knows where he's at, but he also knows where he wants to get to, and is seemingly putting in those hard yards to get to that point. He has a bit of bash and crash about him. So, maybe a partnership with Sam Powell-Pepper moving forward. Obviously, 2 ends of their careers. Is it maybe a baton changing exercise is on the card, but a bit of Bash Brother essence in the meantime could be on the card. So, definitely keen to see him at some point. I'm just not sure if this week is the week, unless, the coaches see a positional change up the field a little bit. That could be on the cards. Funnily enough, with Sydney, they've been doing what they've been doing with a pretty hefty injury list themselves. I had a look just before, and I mean, the likes of Taylor Adams is a test, but the likes of Braden Campbell, Errol Goulden still out, Tom McCartan, concussion, Justin McInerney, Lewis Melican, who I guess is, he has his extended periods in their first team, but then seems to find himself on the out. Tom Papley, Dane Rampy injured. So, I mean, they're going great guns, and that's a lot of first team players on the bench. So, can we be a giant killer this week? I definitely hope so. That'd be quite the spectacle, and stranger things have happened against Sydney at Adelaide Oval. Maybe when our team has been a bit better overall, but I definitely didn't expect to beat them by 100 points a couple of years ago. So,
when they were
not that I'm forecasting that, but weird shit happens. Scott Lysette, last minute, it wasn't a last minute kick, but dying stages of the game, Ruckman don't do that type stuff to get us a win there. So, we didn't win last year, but we had the reverse Amati party. So, hopefully a bit of that bad luck carries over, and we can take advantage again with a healthy spine and some role players getting to work. But look, no, in all honesty, I'll be interested to see the teams. We'll obviously go through the preview in a couple of days' time. Keep my powder dry. I look forward to the ins and outs with Kane Farrell being a test after his unfortunate niggle, and like you said, Lukosius, whether they pull the trigger on him or just keep him back for another week. That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the big ones, obviously, for Sydney is the fact they've lost, and it's obviously, hopefully McCartan's okay, but another injury for McCartan, concussion, which I'd expect where he might be a little bit, a few weeks for them. But for us, just purely from the point of view of what we're looking for as far as matchups go, he's one of the most important players down back. So it's a big win for Port Adelaide as far as how they game plan their forward line work. So and I just had a brief look at Wheelo ratings, and at the moment they have it's a reasonably strong prediction, but 67.2% prediction of a 15-point win for Sydney. So that's not a large margin. So,
Well, we haven't been blown out that often this year. So perhaps that goes into it. Our defensive integrity goes into it. And St. Kilda surprisingly pushed them to the line. Gave up a pretty hefty lead, mind you, but made them work for it. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We'll see you later in the week.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, thank you, Jamie, as always, for what is always a fun, robust review. I always sometimes at some point in the episode I go, geez, we're getting through this pretty quickly. And then at the end of the episode, I'm like, here we are hitting 2 hours again. We always do it.
Same here. Yeah.
I'm very, very proud of our effort that we've drawn it back to comfortably getting it done in 2 hours rather than the 3-hour Lord of the Rings marathons we did in the early days, as fucking fun as they were. As for my work schedule, and I'm sure yours, I'm glad to get it done.
A lot more tangents, probably, and a lot more rambling. Going back a couple of years. And so for anyone listening from back then, thank you specifically, but obviously everyone that consumes our content each week in various forms. We love you all. We appreciate everything.
Yeah. Thanks for sticking through the learning periods, and now we've got like a tight podcast. That 2 hours, as tight as that could be. So we love doing this, and we appreciate your support. So no, thank you very, very much, and we look forward to being back in your ears later this week for the preview of the Sydney match. And shout out if you're around Adelaide Oval on Saturday. Shout us out, and sure we'll be happy to have a beer with you. But we will be there, and looking forward to it. So thank you. Looking forward to the weekend.
Can la pera. Have a good week, everyone. See you later.